The year is 1980. You are 13 years old and begging your mom to take you to the theater to watch The Shining. The new horror movie is directed by Stanley Kubrick and based on the Stephen King novel published in 1977. After your mom reluctantly agrees, you walk out of the theater traumatized and mesmerized, knowing that you have just witnessed an instant classic. And a classic it is. Since its release, The Shining has been placed on many top horror films lists, as well as being placed 35 on Empire Magazine's top 100 movies of all time. The film currently has an 84 on Rotten Tomatoes, with an average rating of 8.5 out of 10, and Roger Ebert even inducted the film into his Great Movies list. The film was a financial success too, grossing $47 million against a $19 million budget. What did the original novel's author have to say about the success? The movie has no heart. There's no center to the picture. I wrote the book as a tragedy, and if it was a tragedy, it was because all the people loved each other. Here, it seems like there's no tragedy because nothing is to be lost. Despite the iconic status of the film, King felt that it did not live up to the novel that he wrote a few years prior. But maybe King is onto something. Fast forward to the year 2021, and the phrase, "the book is always better," is all too common. In the era of modern cinema, it seems that every film is either a reboot, sequel, or adaptation. This begs the question, what are the implications, good or bad, of adapting a literary work into a visual medium? Ever since the earliest film adaptation of Robinson Crusoe in 1902, there has never been a shortage of adaptive works in the film medium. Sherlock Holmes holds the record for most adaptations at 210. James Bond is another franchise that just keeps getting adapted, and readapted, and readapted, and readapted, and readapted. Jurassic Park, The Godfather, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and most recently Dune, are only a few in the extensive list of successful page-to-screen adaptations. Perhaps the most popular form of adaptation today is the comic book genre. X-Men launched a new era when it released in 2000, and viewers have been fascinated with the story of the superhero ever since. This has only elevated with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is the most commercially successful franchise of all time. All these films have become engraved into pop culture, and are instantly recognizable by even the most casual moviegoer. These films, despite their success, are not without their differences to the source material, however. Scenes are cut, added, and changed to fit the narrative as it can be told in a visual medium. In the publication Essays on Film Adaptation, it is stated, "The adaptation, situated somewhere between the categories of novel and film, simultaneously recognized as both and as neither, challenges the novel-film binary, thereby refuting the hierarchy that situates the novel as innately superior to the film." Novels and films are fundamentally different in the way the stories are told. While novels have access to an infinite amount of descriptive words and points of view, the film language is primarily visual, a luxury that written narrative does not have. The trade-off is that films are often confined to a 1 to 2.5 hour runtime. Studios often aim for a shorter runtime in films for a couple of reasons. Plainly, the shorter a movie, the more times that movie can be shown, and the more tickets can be sold. On top of this, a shorter film is more easily consumable by general audiences. Needless to say, cutting scenes in a movie in favor of ticket sales can harm a film substantially. Zack Snyder, director of the comic book adaptation Justice League, has been very open about the movie studio mandating a 2-hour runtime for his film. Eventually, after a lot of production trouble, the results were lackluster at best. This led to the release of his full version of the film, Zack Snyder's Justice League, in 2021. This 4-hour movie behemoth included a lot more development for the story and for the characters, and was infinitely more successful than its predecessor, both critically and financially. Take a look at another one of Snyder's comic book adaptations, Watchmen. In 2009, Zack Snyder directed the 3-hour epic based on the 1987 graphic novel of the same name, written by Alan Moore. Much of the appeal of Moore's original novel was the timeliness of the story. It came out in a time when political tensions were high, and much of the public contemplated their powerlessness in a world of power. When Zack Snyder and writers David Hayter and Alex Say adapted the work, they kept the film as accurate to the source material as possible. The story beats, the dialogue, and even specific comic panels adapted into Snyder's signature style. These faithful reenactments are appreciated by lifelong fans of the original novel. Oftentimes, viewers of a film adaptation have been waiting their whole lives to see a specific moment or hear a single piece of dialogue delivered from their favorite story on the silver screen. Sometimes, however, they may be let down. Snyder's Watchmen is an interesting case of how changing the medium that a story is told can affect the subtext of the story itself. The original novel, in addition to being a commentary on politics of the time, commented on the nature of the day's comic book genre. The characters wore traditional spandex suits and had conversations about the way the world was and how it's changed since the emergence of costumed heroes. The film changes the commentary from comic books to comic book films of the day. Snyder references the restricting rubber suits found in the late 90s and common movie cliches. This change was warranted, but overall may be futile in the grand scheme of the narrative. Author Alan Moore has been publicly disappointed in the adaptation and prefers his work not to be adapted at all. I'm very pessimistic about adaptations from one medium to another. I tend to think that if something was derived from one medium, there's no real immediate reason to think that it's necessarily going to be as good or better if adapted into another one. My main point about films is that I don't like the adaptation process, and I particularly don't like the way of modern comic book to film adaptations, where essentially the central characters are just franchises that can be worked endlessly. I've never watched any of the adaptations of my books. I've never wanted to, and there's absolutely no chance of me doing so in the future. That's sweeping, but the vast majority of them are pointless. Sound familiar?
So the images are striking, but to me that's surface, it's not substance. So I used to describe The Shining, the film, as something like a beautiful car that had no engine in it.
What was it that King disliked so much about the film adaptation of his novel? Well, to put it plainly, it was the fact that it was a film. Stanley Kubrick took the liberty of writing his own version of the story, and in the process, lost what was so important to King. The original author saw the story as how the most normal of people can be tipped over the edge of insanity. Kubrick wrote the character of Jack Torrance as an already off-kilter man who was possessed by the dark spirits of the hotel. See the difference? But is this change bad? The story Kubrick told is hailed as one of the best horror films to date, and his creative decisions only augmented his twisted world that he built within his film. Maybe the story that he wanted to tell wasn't that of King's original at all, but one that would be better served by the visual medium of film. It has been proven time and time again by original films that the visual medium can sustain itself separately from written works. So, is it important to maintain accuracy to the source material at all? The short answer is, it's up to you. Adaptation has become part of our culture as much as any other original written or visual work. Viewers flock to the theaters to see a story that they've always dreamed of viewing on the big screen. This is a practice that is here to stay. Some go to see the story leap off the page in an exact one-to-one recreation. Others go without any previous knowledge of the source material. Regardless, every film will face its own challenges when translating the story to a visual medium. Changes will always be made, but done so out of necessity in order to better convey the story. Whether the viewers or the authors approve of the changes is to each their own. But at the end of the day, it's for us to decide. Is the book always better?